Hello and welcome to Lion Mouse Commentary. I'm Holland and this is my best friend Tori.
Hi!
If you're new to our show, we rank various forms of entertainment out of a total score of 10 with only 2 points allowed for our personal taste. Don't worry, we break down everything as we go. Feel free to agree, disagree, or just find something new to enjoy. Just be sure to tread lightly. There will be hot takes and spoilers ahead. And cut to the intro.
This anymore.
Well, you can't overdo it.
You have to space out the bits.
Yeah, it won't be special.
Yeah.
So, alrighty. So, if you haven't read the title yet, today we are reviewing the next 4 episodes 5 through 8 of the TV series Redwall. So Redwall, technically it's season 1 of the Redwall TV series. This was familiar to me and blind to Tori. So if you're this is your first listen, I had Tori blindly read the first book of the series, which we reviewed for this podcast. And then if you haven't heard yet, please go back and listen to our previous episode where we cover episodes 1 through 4 so that you'll be caught up on everything that's happened up to this point in the show. And then you can come back and listen to this if you would like. So I do have a little bit of a background. I've kind of condensed it, so I have a little more robust background on the first episode. I don't want to overplay it. So if you're not familiar with this medium or this show, Redwall is an animated television series, also known as Brian Jacques' Redwall, and it was a 3-season adaptation of the books Redwall, Matamayo, and Martin the Warrior, and was originally broadcast from 1999 until 2002. It was produced by Nelvana, which is a Canadian animation studio, and each episode is around 22 minutes in length, and the series had a total of 39 episodes, so that's all 3 seasons. Brian Jacques was consulted on the story and attended production meetings in Toronto and Los Angeles. The first Redwall TV series episode aired September 12th, 1999, and the final episode aired February 19th, 2001. The series aired the first episode in the US on PBS on April 1st, 2001, and the series finale aired in the US on July 28th, 2002. A 4th season was originally planned, but the show was canceled for a planned filmed adaptation that unfortunately never saw the light of day. So just to recap episode 4, this is a brief synopsis of episode 4, which we reviewed in our last episode. Following the complex clues which promise to lead to Martin's sword, Matthias climbs high into the abbey roof and the kingdom of the crazy King Bull Sparrow. A feisty sparrow returns a kindness and addresses him as King Sparrow flies to attack Asmodeus, who has Martin's sword. The king returns in time to fight. Wow, that's a weird synopsis. I just copied and pasted it, and there's a word missing there. The king returns in time to fight, I guess, Matthias, who narrowly escapes death. But at last, Matthias knows where the sword's quest must end in a battle against the vile snake. So that is a brief synopsis of episode 4, and episodes 5 through 8 are entitled, episode 5 is called Clooney's Clowns, episode 6 is called High Standards, episode 7 is called Captain Snow, and episode 8 is called Battle Plans. So Tori is going to kick us off into our first category.
Okay. So for TV shows, for our first category, we do plot, story, and cohesion. This also can overarch not just what the episodes we're talking about, but the season as a whole. And we allot 2 points for this, and I gave this 1 point out of 2. I think the things that it gets right is great, and then there were significant problems or confusing tidbits that I think cut that enjoyment. So, I was confused pretty much straight from the get-go. I started episode 5, I got about 5 minutes in, and I paused, and I said, this wasn't in the book at all. Episode 5 is some new imagination scene with new characters that don't exist in the book, and I was like, okay, well, maybe it'll be relevant. Like, you know how we talked about, like, in the last episode, that they kind of add these scenes of Matthias's backstory, and I thought that they were good additions. And I was like, okay, maybe they're just cooking here, and I'm not sure what's going on. I need to wait and, like, hopefully see what's going on. Nope! That episode could be completely taken out, and nothing would have changed, because nothing changed at all. In that, it was just an episode about this
traveling
circus with the circus leader, and she's kind of like this. It almost seems like she's kind of, I'll talk about her more in characters, but like it kind of seems like she's meant to serve a role, but by the end of the episode nothing's actually different. So why were you here? It doesn't further the story at all. Literally, you could trash that entire episode and nothing would change. That's a huge problem when you only have one season to adapt a pretty lengthy novel. I think that that's wasted time, and it makes my issue from the last episode, and that continues into this episode. The pacing, again, is such an issue because we're already flying. We've been flying since episode 1 of this season. We're flying through all of the scenes. We're also taking scenes and putting them in new orders. And now we have wasted 22 valuable minutes on an episode that means nothing. Why did we do that? I didn't like that at all. And then I got worried because I finished episode 5 and I was like, if the rest of the show is like this, like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, this is going to be a rough episode. Now, thankfully, we get to episode 6 and we're back on track, but it was like episode 5 was a big fever dream. Nobody even mentions or references anything that happened in that episode. So again, it literally has no lasting power at all. It's not like you're like, well, with the skills that I learned from Ivy, I think is her name. Yeah, Circus Master Ivy. With the skills that Ivy taught me, it'll be helpful in this situation. Nothing even like that. Like, we don't have any carryover, which is a problem because you're adapting a novel, so each scene and each arcing piece does build toward the next one. So to have that completely unnecessary and irrelevant episode in the middle of all of this was a big problem, I think, and it just made the pacing problem even worse. They really could have used that extra 22 minutes to spend extra time with some of the characters that I feel like are falling by the wayside, or we don't get a very clear picture of their motivations or even personality. And that was just, that was such a disappointment. But we're back on track with episode 6. Now we're back to actual novel happenings and events. But I am also confused a little bit. This was in episode 5. Methuselah is like dying, and they're all like, don't tell Matthias. And I was like, why? Because this is one of the bigger changes from the book to the show, is that, like, in the book, spoilers, by the way, in the book, Methuselah dies, but it's not till the very end, or not very end, but close to the end. Mm-hmm. It's like in the 3rd act. So it's not a huge plot point, that it's not an early plot point like they've made it in the show. So they're like, don't tell Matthias that, Methuselah's gonna die. But then 5 minutes later, Methuselah dies and Matthias is holding his hand. So again, I was like, why? Like, I don't understand this storytelling. Like, and it wasn't even explained, like, let's not tell Matthias because he has other things he needs to be focusing on right now, or it would crush him, or maybe things will get better and we want him to stay hopeful. Like, no explanation. It's just, don't tell Matthias. But then 5 minutes later, Matthias is holding his hand and, like, telling him he loves him and having his, like, last moment with him. So it's like, again, it felt like a throwaway section. I was so frustrated. That was episode 5. Anyway, we're back on track. Episode 3, six, sorry. I don't know why I said 3. Episode 6, we're kind of back to what we're doing. So now we have this sort of, I don't know, it almost feels like now we've got a little bit of this sort of created conflict. It's made to be a bigger deal, I think, in the show than it is in the book. This created conflict of, like, this internal discourse now in the Abbey, and how different people have very different opinions on how they should be handling Clooney. And, the differences of characters' opinions making it where now there's additional stress because there's interpersonal frustration and tension there. And they kind of, like, acknowledge that, you know, this is probably a tactic of Clooney, is that, you know, he's turning us on each other. He's getting in our heads so that we'll be fighting amongst each other and we won't be as focused on the problem at hand. So they kind of address that as like a good, I think a pretty realistic moral in a way, because I think sometimes in real life, like, you get into like discourse or disagreement with other people that may be working toward the same goal, but you have very differing opinions on how to get there, and it can cause like a lack of like smooth stride toward that goal because the focus has shifted. So I think that for the most part, that's a pretty realistic moral. But to place it right after we've had this like carnival circus where everybody's spirits have been lifted, it just felt misplaced, like a misplaced timed thing. So it was like, I don't dislike the moral or the lesson. I just don't like where it came, because it just feels, I don't know, a lot about these 4 episodes just feels like misplaced and mistimed. There's also, they get all the way to the Shrews and Captain Snow, which again is an Act 3 section, and now we're in the middle of the like the season, and we're already like handling, in my brain there's only 2 major scenes left to happen. And so I'm thinking, are they going to take the last 5 episodes and do only 2 major plot points? Because now I feel like we've flown too fast. We're too close to the end now, but we still have all of these episodes to go. I'm curious how they're going to fill those last 5 episodes based on the pace that we've been going for these first 8. We're just, the pacing is just so strange, and there are important minutes wasted on things that feel irrelevant or disjointed from the main flow. That now that we get to episode 8 and it feels like things are tracking the way they should, but again, I get to the end of 8 and I go, now where can we go from here? There's, you know, if we go at the same pace, we should be done by episode 10. But there's 13 episodes, so is there any significant plot point that happened earlier in the book that we haven't even touched on? I don't remember at this point, because I feel like we've been barreling through so much of the book to get to this point. So I know that's like, I sound like I'm beating up these episodes. I think it's just hard, and I talked about this the last time we talked about Redwall just a couple episodes ago. Because of how close together I've consumed the original source and this show, I see those differences so much starkly. I see them. They're there.
They're more stark.
Right. They're more stark than if years had gone by or something between these two things. Now, I do think that, like, overall, you know, the story is still built in a way where you're rooting for your protagonists and you hate your antagonists, you know, and Clooney is still trying different tactics throughout these episodes to, you know, siege upon Redwall, and he's met with opposition, and different characters step up to do different things, and they do those things well. I'll talk about them more in characters. But overall, it's hard to... I think you lose a little bit of your clear linear orientation in these episodes. The first 4 episodes have a little bit of that because the pacing is fast, but I think the first 4 episodes were easier to follow than these middle 4, because everything that I think is going to happen is either glossed over or we go in a completely different direction than what I know to be coming. So maybe if I hadn't read the original book, I wouldn't even have that critique, because I'm going in completely blind. I don't know what's coming. But it's just the unfortunate game of, like, being familiar with one and then going into the other and seeing how different that they are. The unfortunate reality is that I did not enjoy these 4 episodes as much as the first 4 episodes because they felt so messy compared to the first 4, and the storytelling felt less intentional than the first 4 did. So even though I have a lot of little critiques, I didn't want to give it like less than 1 because I still think that the bones of what's there is still good. There's just so much fluff, way more fluff than there should be for how short of a time frame you have to adapt this. So that was really my biggest critique. I don't have a ton more to say than that. So 1 point out of 2 for plot.
Alrighty, so I also gave this 1 out of 2 points for plot. I have a lot of the same critiques that you have. A lot of places where this show falters is the way that it deviates from the source material. Although I do think it's important to kind of try to view this as its own medium, versus it being a straight 1-for-1 adaptation of the book. I think the first episodes do kind of set up that like this is going to be a bit different from the book, but if you are a fan of the book, it does really blindside you that the first episode in this list, so like episode 5, is just like, where did this story come from? It's not in the book at all. These characters are not in the book. Clooney's plan to try and like sneak into the Abbey with a circus is not in the book at all. And it does really blindside you. I think that it's very odd that episode 4 sets you up to that Matthias is like, all right, now I know where Martin's sword is. Now I can go find Martin's sword. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, just kidding, there's a circus.
Yeah.
Like, it's so puzzling that, like, why have we pressed pause on something that was supposed to be so urgent?
Right. And it builds up that urgency very, like, I think intentionally. So.
Right. So it's very puzzling. Like, why did we just decide that wasn't important for this episode? And I do think, though, if these are re-airing on TV and it's just a one-off episode, it's fine.
Yeah.
But when you're watching these in order chronologically, and I do think this series really was designed to watch chronologically, it is very puzzling. I was actually confused at the beginning of episode 5 when Methuselah's laying there in bed and they're like, don't tell Matthias. Yeah. I'm like, he died? Did he just die?
Right.
And they're just like, and then you're like, oh no, he's not dead.
He's just almost there.
He's just really close.
Yeah.
I was so confused. I thought that he died and I was like, wow, that was quick. And I was like, how are they hiding his sickness while Matthias is still at the Abbey? The book navigates this a little bit better because Matthias is away when Methuselah is killed. So why are they trying to hide this from him while he's in the Abbey? Like you just said, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And then the whole plot with Ivy, like predicting that somebody's gonna die. And then she's like, I was wrong. Just kidding. And then Methuselah dies anyways.
Yeah.
And it's like, so what was the point of that whole exchange? It was really silly. His death, I feel like in this story really has no bearing on the plot. I thought, well, maybe they're going to have him die with Matthias in the middle to give Matthias a catalyst to go find Martin's sword.
Right.
And that does not happen. So I felt like that was a missed opportunity there. However, I do have to say, I can remember as a child watching this episode and thinking, I had not read the books. My first exposure to Redwall was this TV series. And watching this episode, and I thought it was great. Like, I really enjoyed it.
The fun circus!
I thought it was great. I thought it was neat that there was, like, this cool female protagonist, female character, mouse character who's, like, throws knives and, like, wow, that's so cool. So, I do think, to its credit, as a show designed for kids, as a young girl watching this show, it was it. Like, that was it. It was a good episode. And to me, it didn't matter that it didn't follow the book because that wasn't the point. I was just enjoying a good kids TV show. So I have to give them a little credit that I do think it is a well-designed episode. It's interesting. I still think it follows the heart of the story, even though it is deviating from the source material. I think it is a great it parallels the source material really well. It fits. These characters, Clooney's plot, all of this feels organic to the environment we've created thus far with the show. So I do have to give them credit there for branching out and trying something different. I think that it worked. It was executed really well, even if there are some kind of big plot flaws that don't really make a lot of sense. So I have to give them a little bit of credit there. Episode 6, I think you touched on. I like how they actually intentionally highlight that there are interpersonal conflicts amongst the Redwall inhabitants, and it's directly connected to a young audience that, like, we've all been cooped up together and we're all getting tired of each other. That's a very real thing that nobody thinks about in a siege, or, you know, in, you know, a lockdown situation,
any sort of survival situation.
Even like in 2020 when people couldn't, you know, go to work, and now they're stuck at home with their kids, couldn't go to school, and they're stuck with their kids in their house all day, and mom and dad and all the kids are stuck at home. And, you know, that's a very real circumstance, is that people that care about each other and love each other and have learned to live and work together in an environment of too much of each other is going to cause conflict. And so I like that I feel like the book didn't really touch on it as much for the Redwallers, but I like that these characters had some opportunity to at least identify that, like, we're all going a little stir crazy here, and this conflict that people are having are because we've had too much of each other and we're all under a lot of stress and can't get away from each other. So I really liked that. I thought that was a pretty mature theme to kind of explore a little bit. I thought it was a little weird in that episode that they're like, if we don't steal the tapestry back from Martin, we're gonna all have to abandon the Abbey.
Yeah,
and it's like,
that's
why?
An extreme take.
Those are like two very different, like, if then, you know?
Yeah.
So I did think that was a little odd. Episode 7, I didn't particularly think this episode was super strong. Basil just shows up with a hurt leg, and I'm like, well, when did he hurt his leg? And I get that there was like conflict beforehand, but we didn't watch him get injured or you know, have that. He just like shows up with a hurt leg. I was like, when did Basil hurt his leg? Did I miss that? Nope, I didn't miss it. It was just very weird. Captain Snow, I like that he's kept very close to the book. That whole plot with him giving information on Asmodeus, Matthias with his medallion, the shrews being, you know, him being a, you know, natural predator going after the shrews, and then the shrews are, you know, Matthias makes a deal that if he gets Asmodeus' sword, then you won't need a shrew or a mouse ever again. And I like they kept that, and it felt very natural, pacing-wise, with the story. I did think that it was neat that Matthias goes out and finds Captain Snow, and then this action happens back at the Abbey. We did get a little bit of that back and forth of that dual perspective plot from the book. I like that we got a little bit of that. And then I thought it was like Matthias is just like running back to the Abbey, and I was like, why are we keeping Matthias at the Abbey? Like, what's wrong with letting this kid go on a quest? But at the same time, I do think that Matthias staying in the action at the Abbey, it does make Martin's sword a little bit less of this MacGuffin. It's like Matthias in the book feels like, to an extent, it feels a little bit like he's going after Martin's sword, and like that one item is going to save the day. Sure. And in this series, it's not given that same high precedence. Matthias is staying in the Abbey where he believes he's needed to help his, you know, family and community at the Abbey. And so I do think that choice does kind of change the impact and the need to finding Martin's sword. So it's a little bit less of a MacGuffin in finding it. I do think that when Basil and Jess leave in episode 6, I'm sorry, backtracking a little bit. In episode 6, when Basil and Jess leave to go steal the tapestry, I like this tension that we're given where we don't know why they're leaving. Yeah. We're just seeing them like whispering in the shadows, and morale is declining in the Abbey. So it is believable that they just ditched. They just left. Yeah. They're like, we can't handle this anymore. It's a lost cause, and just leave. And we keep that tension in the story until we find out. Like, they're going to go and try and get the tapestry back. I do though think it is a little weird that Matthias steals the tapestry and none of Clooney's minions have bows and arrows. He's just sitting up in the tree and they're just like,
climb.
Yeah, it was just very, very weird. I thought this was an army. But it is a kid's show still, so I can't be like super, super harsh, but at the same time, like, it is what it is. And then I do like how episode 8 really felt close to the book. That kind of Clooney having his nightmares, his goons having this like treachery and treason amongst each other, trying to betray Clooney, the crossbow that's built, that Constance makes, and then how they think that Clooney's dead. They start having this feast. They're really caught off guard, and then this tower is attempted to be built on the side. And I felt like that followed the book really closely.
Yeah.
And then it was a nice balance of kind of like action and intrigue, and we get to see from Clooney's perspective, Clooney's side perspective, that like the Abbey is wrong and they don't know. And so I felt like episodes 6 and 8 were not that there's anything necessarily wrong with episode 7. I felt like it was a little slow, pacing wise, and it felt a little unnecessary that Matthias goes out, meets Captain Snow, and then immediately just goes back to the Abbey. But he does bring the shrews with him, so that's kind of like a helpful, kind of has reinforcements with him. And he does gain more information about Asmodeus and Martin's sword. But I felt like episodes 6 and 8 were done pretty well. Episode 5, again, it's nothing like the book. So if we're talking straight adaptation, I think it's a miss here. But I would say as just a standalone episode of a kid's show in this kind of environment and world we're built, I think it does fit. But I don't think it's perfect. I think there are some flaws in between. So that's why I give it half credit. So 1 out of 2.
Yeah, so I was curious about the character of Ivy, and I was like, well, maybe it's like a reference to another book in the Redwall series. So I like looked her up. No, she doesn't exist in any. And I was like, dang, like it would have been cool if it was like, well, let's just pull a character from another book as like a little like, nod to the series fans. But nope, it wasn't that, unfortunately.
Yep.
All right, so with characters, we allot 3 points for TV shows, and I gave this 1.5 points. Again, half credit. So a lot of that has to do with the fact that, number one, who is this Circus Master Ivy? She shows up, and she's cool. Don't get me wrong, she's cool, but the purpose that she serves seems to be really missed. So she has this whole like I'm an oracle vibe, but then she says she was wrong about it, but then she wasn't wrong about it. So that whole thing is a little confusing. You mentioned that. She also seems to almost step into like I'm gonna like be a fight trainer for Matthias, but then that doesn't actualize into anything within the episode or after the episode. So that's kind of a missed opportunity. Other than the fact that she like kind of proves herself to be cool to Cornflower, who is very cynical of her in the beginning. There's not really much change at all in anybody in regards to her appearance, role, and departure. So I just feel like she could, other than being cool, she doesn't really serve anything outside of just being cool, which that's a valid thing, especially when you are looking at like young, like media for a young audience. Sometimes you just need a character that's cool. So she fits that. She serves that. She's, she's confident and she's got a good attitude about things and she has cool skills and fights well, but she just doesn't do anything for the story or really for anybody else. She's just there and is cool and then leaves. So it's kind of like, for me, it's like, again, very middle of the road. Like, I don't hate her, but she just didn't do anything for anybody. One character that I think gets, there are two actually characters that I think get stronger in these 4 sets of this set of 4 episodes. One of those is Basil Stagg Hare. He steps into a nice role of which is true of him in the book too, but I think you get to see it a little bit more. He doesn't try to like assert authority where he should not, but Basil is not in any way afraid of being like, this needs to be done, I will step up and do it. Or I see a problem, let's address it. Like, he is an initiator, but he's not a bully, and he's also not bossy. And I think that makes for a really nice character, not to mention the fact that he's one of the best assets that the Abbey has in regards to actual combat, because he's fast and he has power and size on his side in the same way that Constance does, but I think he has more speed than Constance has, which makes him a very like good a good fighter in the role of something like a bait and switch. Like, he's a good character to like bait and switch somebody because he has the speed on his side. And he's a very clever and smart character too. So I think he's a very nice, well-rounded character. And I think he makes himself very useful in these 4 episodes, which is nice to see. I think the same could be said of Jess Squirrel, but she's just not seen quite as much as Basil is in these 4 episodes. Another character that I think gets better and better in this set of 4 episodes is Cornflower. We talked about her a little bit in the last episode about how we like how she has a little bit more of a presence in the show than she has in the book, and how she fills her shoes very well. And I think that is even more true as these episodes go on. Cornflower becomes a very, again, well-rounded character. She's not a fighter, but she is a very smart and very reasonable character. She gives a lot of really solid advice and perspective to different characters, but particularly Matthias. You know, she's got a lot of really good, like, strong and soft wisdom. You know, she has this whole scene where, you know, Clooney's about to siege and she's in there washing dishes, and Matthias is like, what are you doing? You know, and she's like, I'm doing this because it's normal and everybody feels better if there's any level of normalcy. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it feels almost like a throwaway line, but when you like really soak it in, it makes an impact. And it's like, that's a smart thing to think, and it's like very indicative, I think, of her personality and how good that personality is in the whole cast of Redwall, and how she really does she's very content to play the behind the scenes anchor character, but in doing so well, I think she becomes a very noticeable character. But she's not aiming for that spotlight. She has no desire to shoot arrows from the top of the wall, but she desires to feed those who are doing it. And so I think she just becomes a very great character in this show. I think she really, really shines. She gets better and better. The dynamic, though, shifting when Methuselah dies, I think is expected, but I don't know how I feel about it because it is so early. And I know it fuels the plot idea that morale is low because Clooney isn't giving up. We've lost the tapestry and Methuselah's dead. It's like the 1, 2, 3 knockout. So I understand a kind of why they did that, but that dynamic shift still feels a little early. And at the same time, it doesn't feel like it motivates our central character quite enough. You would think that with the established idea that Methuselah is very close to Matthias, you would think that his death would shift the dynamic in such a way where Matthias would have a whole lot of resolve. Not to say that he wouldn't grieve or have a moment of sadness, but it almost feels like it just shifts in the way you don't want it to, in the way that's a little less satisfying, I guess. The Shrew community is obviously very close-knit. I think they were very fun to watch. They were kind of, in a way, the Shrews and how comfortable they felt with all of each other and how they spoke back and forth to each other kind of reminded me of our cast in the Abbey. It almost felt like a small parallel, almost like an echoing of that kind of community where it's like, yeah, they're bickering, yeah, they have different opinions, but it's very obvious that they all try to work together toward the same goal and care about each other. So it felt in almost a way like Matthias left the Abbey, meets the shrews, and it's still like a tiny piece of that dynamic comes with him in meeting the shrews. So I thought that was kind of nice. But there are a lot of other characters in the cast, and a lot of them do not get a good moment to shine. Father Abbott does not really get much moments to shine. He has a few lines that I would say are kind of significant for plot, but we don't get to see a lot of like him just being him. We don't get to see a lot of like interpersonal communication between him and other characters. Even characters like Constance don't have as much attention. There are and then some of the smaller characters, like I don't even think we saw any of the otter characters. So, where'd they go? Mm-hmm. The moles are only seen. I think there's one scene where two moles are talking to each other, mm-hmm. and that's about it. So like the moles have kind of like taken a back seat. We see Warbeak make one appearance, and it's for a plot reason. She comes in and Constance says, I need you to go find Matthias and bring him back. And that's it. Like, that's all we see of her, which granted, the sparrows don't have as much of a seat, because it's like, we meet them, we have that whole arc. They kind of go do their own thing, and then they come in at the end to kind of like boost the allies. So I wasn't expecting that, but it's like we have so many characters in the cast, and we're flying through these episodes, and I just want more time with some of them. I don't even think we saw Ambrose Spike in any of these episodes, or like smaller characters like that. So I just, in a way, you kind of miss them because you haven't had the opportunity to really like sit with any of these characters. Matthias, I think, like, Matthias is still incredibly likable. Like, you're still rooting for him. But the whole back and forth with him, like leaving the Abbey and then coming back to the Abbey and then leaving the Abbey and coming back to the Abbey, I think it makes him feel a little bit more like an errand boy and less like a quester, which, take it or leave it. I wasn't sure how to feel about it, if I liked it okay or if I didn't. I think because of just how I've consumed the world of Redwall, I'm probably always going to prefer the way that it's formatted in the book, which is Matthias taking this quest role, because I think that he does a lot of growing in that third act, when he has to go questing and leave the Abbey for a while and come back. So it feels like he's not growing quite at the same rate in the show as he would be at this plot point in the book. But again, I think the good things are really good, and I think the not good things are noticeable. So again, 0.5 points for me. So 1.5 out of 3.
Alrighty, so for characters for me, I actually gave this 2 points out of 3. So I think that in general, the characters in these episodes are very consistent. Specifically, I think the Abbott, Constance, Basil, Jess, Matthias, and Cornflower are very consistent with the first 4 episodes of the show. And the biggest reason I think I gave more points in this episode than I did in our last Redwall episode, is because I think there is revelation of these characters growing in depth and improving in their character development. Whereas the first 4 episodes, I think with the pacing, it felt like it was so fast that there wasn't a lot of growth. And I think that especially with episode 6 and episode 8, episode 5 as well, I think there's a lot of internal conflict within these characters. And we see some, maybe not change in the sense of like their core essence or their core values or perspectives change, but they have a tendency to rub up against one another and show more depth and growth. So, for example, I think in episode 5 with Ivy coming into the scene, I like that Basil, Constance, and Cornflower all have this healthy level of suspicion against her, and the cast of characters at the Abbey aren't shown to be these kind of like dumb, naive simpletons that are just going to trust anybody that comes in. They think that, she's someone that can't really be trusted. I don't think her character really has a lot of a point. She's just kind of this cool female character like Tori kind of already talked about. Matthias as a character, I think that we get to see a lot more resolve in him when he won't give in to Clooney's demands. We can't give in to his demands and surrender. We have to stand for what's right. If we surrender, he'll just make us slaves. We know that that's not going to end well. So our answer is not to surrender because it's the path of least resistance, because we know it's not going to end well. We see this more complex and mature thinking within him. I think that he sees Martin's sword as kind of this symbol of morale. So in the same way that Jess and Basil wanted to bring the tapestry back to kind of help boost morale and reunite the Abbey, I think Matthias seems to think of Martin's sword as this even bigger picture of like security, stability, safety, and, you know, morale of the people of the Abbey. I think that Methuselah dying in episode 5 is really kind of lackluster. I really don't like the way they did it, especially because Methuselah's parting words to Matthias is completely irrelevant to Matthias, and it's completely irrelevant to the whole story. His parting words to Matthias are, trust yourself and follow your dreams. What does that have to do with anything? Nothing.
My dreams is that you're not dying.
You don't die?
Yeah.
Trust yourself. We don't see any time where Matthias is struggling with self-doubt or confidence. And follow your dreams. Like, where did that come from? That's the lamest line, I think, in the whole show so far. Trust yourself and follow your dreams. One, bad advice anyways. Like, no, you need to be smart. But like, I would think Methuselah's parting words to Matthias would be like, you know, I know you can persevere and find Martin's sword, or like, you know, I know that you are going to follow in Martin's footsteps and be able to protect the Abbey, or I know that you're going to help, you know, lend your strength to our community and help us, you know,
or even just something
prevail.
Like, I'm proud of you.
Yeah,
or
I'm
something.
proud of you. Or even like that. Like, you were always like a son to me. Like, it sounds super campy, but at least it would be
more relevant
to Matthias, who has no family. Like, this is his family. Like, you know, no matter what anyone says, you were like a surrogate son to me, and I'm proud of you, and I know you're going to be okay. Like, that would be cheesy as heck, but it would at least make sense. I was so mad when that happened. I just thought it was so lame. Exactly what you already touched on with Cornflower was like my notes to a T, like with her washing dishes and just preventing panic. And she's very brave and just willing to do her part. In episode 8, I think, is where we really get to see a lot of meat and kind of grit within these characters, and particularly where Constance and Basil are working together to build this bow with the plan to assassinate Clooney.
Yeah.
And Constance is, you know, kind of, no pun intended, but spearheading these efforts. And the abbot makes it very clear. He's like, this is not what I'm about. Like, I don't want to take another life. Like, no, I can't. This goes against what I value life on both sides. It's kind of the abbot's perspective. But then he yields to Constance's perspective and conviction to do what's right, to protect everyone. And he doesn't force her to bend to his own personal convictions. And he admits, even after Clooney is assassinated, like, that there's merit in Constance's efforts. And I think that's an extremely complex character moment for both of them.
Yeah.
They're both kind of the, like,
they're like the dad and
they're
mom
like the
of
mom
the
and
Abbey.
yeah, exactly. The mom and dad of the Abbey, and they don't agree, but they can both see each other's perspectives and how morally both of them are coming from an understanding place, but both of them need to do what they need to do. Those lines can run parallel to each other and still get to the same goal. And I think that's a pretty deep display of character growth and depth in this episode. I really liked that they didn't shy away from that or trying to change it. That in episode 6, the abbot was willing to surrender to save lives, but yet when Constance is having this plan, he says, he gives her credit where credit's due, even though it wasn't something that he necessarily would agree with. Squire Julian and Captain Snow, I feel like they were not as robust of a characters as they were in the book. But I also, I kind of credit this into, no, I'll talk about it in aesthetics. The two of them. But yeah, I think overall, I like that we got to see more depth in these characters. We got to watch them think a little bit more critically and comment on the world around them in more complex ways. Even Clooney's goons, when they're planning this treachery back and forth, I liked seeing a little bit more complexity in who these, sinister villains are and how they operate compared to the prior episodes. So that's the reason I actually gave it 2 out of 3 points, because I thought we got to see some good growth.
Okay. All right, so our third category for TV shows is aesthetics. So we allot 2 points, and I gave this full points again. I really love the style of this show. I love the 2D animation. I think that it has a lot of charm in its imperfection, like I mentioned before. I also was really impressed. There was a lot of, in these 4 episodes, there was a lot of usage of things like firelight and dappled tree shade, and the lighting was always so nicely shaded accordingly. And for a 22-minute, public kids show, you wouldn't expect so much, thought to be put into something like that. But, I love the way that, when the sun is setting, you can see the way that the shadow moves, all the way across. The shadows are longer than they were when the day was earlier, and the way that the firelight flickers, and it flickers very naturally. And then when they're crossing under trees, and, the way that the sun is coming through the trees, and there are dappled chunks of light that are on the path that are colored much lighter than everything else. Those are small details, but to me, they add a level of realism to animation that I think needs to be addressed, given the merit that I think it's due. I also think that there's a lot of really good sound design in this show. They have a lot of really good use of echo. Certain rooms in the Abbey are very wide open, stony rooms, and when characters are talking amongst them, there's a very appropriate echo that you would expect if you were standing in a big empty cave. I love that kind of thing. I think the score also needs to be mentioned, because there's a lot of fighting sequences in these 4 episodes, or scenes of even if it's not straight fighting, there's some scenes of chase or something like that, action sequences,
combat,
and the score that underlies a lot of those scenes is so consistently exciting, but it's never chaotic or too loud. It's never distracting. It's just constantly there in a way that builds the perfect amount of tension, I think, in that scene, and has all the instruments and instrumentation that feels very real and natural to the world of Redwall and the period that Redwall is suggested to kind of be in. I know we aren't given any years or anything to pinpoint it, but just by the aesthetic and clothing and things like that, you can kind of get this idea of the kind of time frame that Redwall lives in, and a lot of that music is supporting that overall setting, and I think that that's really nice as well. A good detail that I think is probably very easily missed is that there's a cat character, Julian. He's very brief, but I think his eyes are the most distinct ones in the cast, and they are very cat eye. And I thought that was just a nice detail. He could have been given regular, like, you know, black slit cat eyes, but they gave him the bright blue that kind of shine when the light hits it, the way that cat eyes tend to do in like low light situations. And I just thought that was a nice detail. Also, I think one of the best scenes, like cinematically, is the scene where Cheese Thief is shot by the arrow. And the light comes through and it's all silhouette, and we see the arrow go into the side of the tent, but we never actually see the gory part, which is completely understandable as this is a kid's series, but we get all of the impact without any of the trauma. Yeah. I think. And I thought it was one of the most wonderful scenes that was in all of these episodes. Just cinematically, it was amazing. It's like the kind of stuff that you would think somebody like Steven Spielberg would take the time to put together. So it was just like, it was excessively, not excessively to in a bad way. I mean, excessively in a good way. It was like excessively like cinematic, you know, just, I didn't expect something that nice and like planned looking. And then the last note that I have is I love when Cornflower is making soup and she lifts the lid and you see like the watery reflection of her in the soup. And it's just such a nice detail. They didn't have to do any sort of reflection in that soup, but they did Cornflower's reflection, and she's all like wibbly wobbly, you know, because the soup's moving around. And I just thought like it was extra effort they didn't have to make. And I just really appreciate those small things. So I think one of the reasons that I just really think the aesthetics shine in this show is because of how charming it is, and how I don't know what the budget was, but for the supposed like, or what I would guess to be budget and the network that this was on, you don't expect all of those extra little things. Yeah. And yet you get them. And I think that's why it's so pleasing. And there's really, you know, I think there were more like, oh, you know, that was repeated frames or whatever. I think there was more of that in the first 4 episodes. I think these episodes feel like a lot of the scenes are truly like built from the ground up, and I liked that a whole lot. So full 2 out of 2 points for aesthetics for me.
Alrighty, so I actually only gave this 1 out of 2 points.
Oh,
so I did see some flaws in the aesthetics of these episodes, but I do echo a lot of the positives that you say. I love the 2D animation, the traditional animation. I think that the aesthetics, especially between the first 4 episodes and these 4 episodes, are very consistent. It doesn't feel like we had a change in animation style or funding or budget. I like the color palettes of the circus performers. So the Abby tends to have a lot of earth tones, and these circus performers come in and it's very true pigment, like primary colors, and like loud and just visually very fun. And it felt like, wow, this really does feel like the circus is coming to town, because all the colors we've been given have been very like muted and kind of earth toned down a little bit. The juggling animation though was really goofy.
Oh, I don't even remember.
The characters are juggling and they're passing like 2 like knives or whatever between them, and like 6 of them are up in the air, and I was like, guys, come on, like you can watch real jugglers keep 6 things up in the air. And it was just like a circle of whatever it was.
It was moving so fast it was like your eye was blurring.
No, it was like just floating. Oh, like, look, I'm juggling, and it was like juggle, 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 juggle. I was like, come on, guys, come on. It was very like, I mean, I kind of thought it was humorous, but objectively, like, it's not good. In episode 6, Matthias is eating so it's after Methuselah died, and like Matthias is sitting in the opening shot. The Abbot and Constance come into, or whoever it is, come into the Great Hall, and Matthias is sitting there like eating. He's in one of the opening shots, and then they're like, oh yeah, Matthias is so sad. And the camera like cuts to him like sitting like with his knees up, like all alone at a table all by himself. And I was like, wait, he was just in that shot.
He was just fine.
He was just eating his breakfast, like just fine, like 2 seconds
It's like
ago.
he overheard and was like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be sad.
I'm supposed to be sad. Right. In episode 6, there's this like part where they're like handing out spears to these mice. And it's like the goofiest, like slowest thing. They're like, here's a spear. And the mouse is like, and then turns. And then the next mouse like walks up and then turns.
I don't even remember the scene.
We're like, and that's not it exactly, but it was like, this is the goofiest looking thing ever. And it took so long. I was like,
I don't even remember this scene.
There's a shot where we see a mole in full armor. And I just thought it was the funniest, goofiest looking thing ever. It's like got the long snout, and there's like holes in the eyes, and then like holes in the nose so he could breathe. And I was like, why we gotta put a mole in armor? What's he gotta be doing up there?
He could just crawl
like,
underground.
Full body like metal plate armor.
That's funny.
I thought it was so funny. Positives, I agree with like all the positive choices. The sound, the echo when they're in the Great Hall, the color tone, and the sound at night with snow, and the color tone changes with moonlight versus sunlight versus in a dark, cave or something. Clooney's assassination, I liked. I thought the editing was a little bit choppy. It like chops back and forth from like the tent to the arrow, to the tent to the arrow, to the tent to the arrow. And I'm like, this is a little bit too choppy. I feel like we could have extended those a little bit. But I thought it was great at the editing process to kind of build the tension of what we should be expecting. I really didn't like, this is kind of my last little point. I thought that in episode 7, we have Snow and Julian. And Snow, I think proportionally is a great size. Like, I think he's a really good size to interact with the mice. I think Julian is proportionally massive.
Yeah, he is too big.
He is too big. I mean, we can scale our foxes down really small.
Yeah, foxes can be the same size as rats, but this is to be the world's largest tabby cat.
It almost pulled me out of like enjoyment because I was like, this cat is humongous. Like, what are we doing? Like, our owl has been shrunk down. Like, an owl and a mouse are like, huge. And like, we shrunk down our owl. We shrunk down our badger. A badger is as big as a cat.
Yeah.
Like, we shrunk our badger down.
If they're going to be consistent, then Constance should be as large as Julian.
Big as Julian, and she's not. And we shrunk our foxes way too small. Like, I think our foxes should have been the size of Basil Staghair.
Yeah.
And so why couldn't we shrink our cat down just a little bit? Yeah. I understand that he has to be kind of a threat to Matthias, and maybe they wanted to keep that little nod to the book and have Matthias land in his mouth, and like, so he had to be as big enough that Matthias could fit in his mouth. But come on, we didn't need to keep that in there. And I think it's just really visually distracting. And when you're reading a text, you can imagine things as sizes, and it can be past the point of realism, and you just accept it because you're still reading the text of the book, and your imagination can kind of blur those lines. But seeing it on the screen, I felt like it was really, really distracting. I did think that, and likewise in that same episode, I think it was even more starkly jarring because the hornets are hornet-sized for all our animals.
Yeah.
So, like, the hornets are the size of a hornet would be to a human.
Right.
Instead of being, like, a little bit larger or,
a hornet to a mouse is going to be a much larger animal.
Right. So, we've, like, really skewed the realism, and I don't think we need realism. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's a fantasy story with animals. Like, But I think scaling Julian down and maybe scaling those Hornets a little bigger would also have made, even if we just scaled the Hornets up a little bit, I feel like it would have made Julian feel a little bit less jarring. So that was my only thing with that episode. But overall, I still personally I think it's a lot you can overlook and still enjoy. But I think objectively, some of these were a little bit distracting. And a couple, flaws that I think it should have been caught in your post and your editing process. But I get it. It's expensive to make traditional animation. It's hard to, let's just change it, put it back and change it. It's not that feasible. So 1 out of 2 for aesthetics for me.
Okay. Next category is personal taste and preference. I gave this 1 point out of 2 because I'm still enjoying this. But this is the messiest chunk of Redwall that I've experienced. And so my logical side of my brain was being triggered a lot more than normal. Like there are times and places where I'm pretty good at just turning off the brain part and just enjoying something. I'm pretty good at that, honestly. Mm-hmm. There's lots of media that I consume that is probably objectively bad, but, this chunk of Redwall is harder for me to disassociate like that, because I was confused way too much for 4 episodes of a 22-minute children's series. So yeah, it's just middle of the road for me. I'm gonna keep watching. I want to see how the season ends, obviously, and I wasn't having a bad time by any means, but comparatively, I was yeah, this is not peak Redwall right here. So 1 point out of 2.
Alrighty, so I actually gave this 2 out of 2 for personal taste and preference. Again, this was a series that was very near and dear to my heart in my childhood. And even though these episodes may not objectively be the best, they still were a part of my childhood, and I do enjoy the series. Also, my nostalgia of episode 5, because I remember watching that as a kid, and I feel like they re-aired it more than other episodes, so I watched it many times as a kid, just thought it was canon. So my nostalgia for that episode, and then my genuine enjoyment of episode 6 and 8 definitely outweigh my critiques in this aspect. So although I think you can find a lot that is objectively not the best, especially compared to TV shows with way bigger budget and way more resources,
network backing, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that objectively this is not the best TV show ever made. But for me, it's one that it's at pretty high on my list of the TV show that I do enjoy. So 2 out of 2.
Okay. And our last category, as always, is creativity, and I gave this the full 1 point because I still think that this is a show that was set apart from others at its time. I think it has a lot of longevity and rewatchability to it. I think it still holds up even, 25 years later, roughly. So I think, it's a show that I would very comfortably show my nephews in a few years and think that they would really enjoy it. And I think that, sure, the animation itself might be slightly dated, but I think all of the bones of what makes that show what it is still really good and relevant and easy to consume, and has all of that good merit. So, and considering, we talked about this last time, but considering there was no other show like this, especially not on public television at the time, I'm glad that it existed in the time that it did, and I'm glad that it has the recognition. I may have mentioned this last episode. If not, if I have, sorry for repeating. If I haven't, I'm sorry I forgot. But these Redwall episodes so far are one of our most engaged topics recently. Mm-hmm. Please keep engaging. Thank you for all of your comments and support. I'm glad that we are talking about something that you love, and I'm glad that you're telling us about how much you like hearing us talk about something that you love. That's part of the reason for this show. So, we've gotten comments about, Redwall is your childhood, and it means so much to you, and now you're listening to adults talk about it now when you're an adult, and that's part of the fun of this show, and part of the reason that me and Holland created this is because we knew there was going to be things that I was attached to that Holland was indifferent to, or other way around, but we still wanted to sit down and talk about it and acknowledge how our emotional attachment to something is still valid and can change the perspective of things. So that being said, I think that the creativity and the fan base of Redwall, I can understand why the fan base exists the way it does, because I think if I had the experience with Redwall as a kid that you guys have, I'd be in that same boat. So I have to acknowledge that for what it is. So full creativity point.
Alrighty. I also gave this full points for creativity. So even though episode 5 deviates from the books, I think that it is still true to the heart of the source material, and it helps to round out the main cast of characters and shows more depth. So I think that overall, this series, love it or hate it, like the deviations they take or the changes they make to the source material, I think it is a really good adaptation. And I think that so many adaptations of books have swung all the way to it's inspired by, we just rewrote what we wanted to write and we stole and used your characters and made them do whatever we wanted them to do instead of what they should do as characters that you created, you, the author or whoever. Or it swings all the way the other way where it's just shot for shot, line for line, copy and paste from the book. And I think it's important to note that a book is its own medium.
Yeah.
It's not designed to be a film. And so when a screenwriter or a scriptwriter takes a source material and puts it into a new medium, there should be changes. There should be things to change, because I can sit and read a character's internal monologue for 10 pages and be entertained and enjoy that. But if I watch that on screen, I'm going to be bored. Mm-hmm. I don't want to watch somebody sit and think and talk to themselves for 10 minutes. That is boring.
Yeah.
So I think this show, even though there are parts where it deviates, I think for its target audience, as an adaptation of a pretty meaty child's literature book, I think this is a really good adaptation. It's embodying the heart and soul of Redwall and what people love about the book. Is it a perfect one-for-one, shot-for-shot adaptation? No, it is not. But I don't think it should be. And I think that even in these episodes where they have deviations, I think the fact that episode 5, Clooney's Clowns, never happened in the Redwall books, I think that you can still see the care and passion of the creators in making a deviation that still is respectful to the heart of the source material. And so for that reason, I think that's such a rarity. We're either trying to do fan service or we're just stealing characters and putting them in our own story. And I think this is that wonderful, healthy medium of deviating from the original and yet still being true to what the original stood for. So full points for creativity for me.
Cool.
So what was your final score for Redwall?
My final score for episodes 5 to 8 came to 6.5.
Out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
And my score is 7 out of 10. So
there we go.
Yeah.
Still pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close.
It's not off. I feel like I am usually more forgiving in general on things, so it's not often that I have a lower score than you on anything.
It's very uncommon. So any final thoughts?
No, but I am looking forward. Well, yes, I say no, and then I have a thought.
No, but
I am looking forward to seeing how the season ends, because I know what's left from the book, and I'm just so curious how they're gonna use those last 5 episodes. So I'm looking forward to watching the rest.
Nice. Alrighty, are you ready for a few lightning round questions?
Yes, I am.
All right, what was your favorite episode?
I think episode 8.
Yeah.
Episode 8 was really good. Just cinematically was really nice. I felt like we were back on a good pace. We were back on track, it felt like. So I think that was the most satisfying episode for me.
All right. What was your least favorite episode?
5. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My least favorite episode was Captain Snow.
Okay, so 7.
Episode 7. Yeah. I thought it was kind of slow.
I like Captain Snow. He's one of my favorite characters from the book, so...
Because he's a bird.
Yeah, well, so what?
You love birds.
I do.
No, I'm just explaining. Who is your favorite character and your least favorite character up to this point? And then your favorite character and your least favorite character that's new to the story in these episodes.
Okay.
And if they overlap and are the same, that's fine.
So favorite character so far is Cornflower. But Basil Stag Hare is high up there too for me. Least favorite character is Cheese Thief.
Mm-hmm.
That's still true. I think that's the answer I gave last time too.
Because you don't be stealing cheese.
Don't be stealing cheese. It's valuable.
Mm-hmm.
New to these episodes, favorite character would probably be Captain Snow, like I just said. Least favorite, I don't know. There's only I don't know. I want to say Ivy, but I didn't really dislike her. I just thought she was pointless. So I don't think I want to say her. But I like all of the characters introduced in episode 7. That's a hard... I don't know. Can I abstain?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or you could just, if it's still Cheese Thief, then...
Yeah, but he was just not new to those episodes.
Yeah, but I'm saying if they overlap.
Oh, then yeah, still Cheese Thief. I just don't like that guy. Okay. I'm kind of glad he gets shot.
Yeah. If you don't have a new character that you like least, then you could say Cheese Thief.
Yeah.
All right, so my favorite character would probably still be Matthias. And my least favorite character overall... I don't even remember who I said last episode.
I mean, technically,
we're really early
it was last year.
No, don't say that. We can't spoil.
Okay, I'll cut it out.
No, it's fine. You can say we did. We recorded before 2026, so we could get the episode out to you guys on time because we're dedicated.
Yeah, we weren't gonna do that with a 24-hour turnaround. I would stress.
Yeah. I don't know who my least favorite character is. And I don't remember who I said in our last episode. So I'll pause that. My favorite new character would probably be... The only really new characters was the circus crew.
And then Snow, Julian, and the Shrews.
Yeah. I think the otter that's like super strong.
Oh, okay, that guy.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
He does some good stuff. He helps the Abbey out.
Yeah, of course he does.
Cool dude. No lines, but cool dude.
Yeah.
We all do our part. Least favorite new character probably would be not because I dislike them from conceptually, but I think the Shrews are annoying. So probably them. And then least favorite overall character, I don't know. Probably Cheese Thief. He's the one that gets shot, right?
He is.
Yeah, he sucks.
Yeah, I'm glad he gets shot.
Yeah. So he's pretty...
Sorry, that's
pretty
harsh,
lame
but...
dude, Come on, dude. Plan better. What do you think in these 4 episodes specifically was the best adaptation from the book and the least adaptation from the book?
Oh, okay.
Or best and worst, or favorite, least favorite?
Yeah. Honestly, that whole scene where Cheese Thief gets shot is adapted wonderfully. And I genuinely think that's the best scene of this chunk of episodes, in every way, like pacing, storytelling wise, cinematically, adaptation from the source. I think that's just such a great scene. So I would pick that. Least favorite is just the entirety of the existence of episode 5. There is no adaptation. It was a new creation. So while I think that some of the parts of the episode have merit, it's just not present in the original. So I would say that was probably my least favorite adaptation. However, if my answer should be something that does exist in the original book that I think is adapted poorly, it might be just how quickly episode 7 goes, since, it's half of Act 3 is episode 7, and having it all happen within 20 minutes it felt like it just shortened the quest of Matthias. It didn't feel quite as grand or as grueling as it is in the book. Like, it felt like Matthias didn't have to work that hard to get to Captain Snow, where it's a very physically taxing process for him to get there in the book. So I wish that had been stretched maybe into 2 episodes or even longer. So I think that one was just a pretty poorly paced episode comparatively.
Yeah. My favorite adaptation would also be when Chief gets shot. I thought that was really good. And then my least favorite adaptation would be Methuselah's death.
Oh, yeah, that's a good...
Which is in episode 5. But
right.
I would say that. I thought it was just terrible.
Yeah, I forgot about that entirely, but that's a good answer.
All right. So if you could write a side quest episode, like bonus content episodes, like episode 5. It doesn't exist in the book, but it's like a story that theoretically could take place in this book. If you could write an episode like that, what would you like to see?
I would love to see a better focus or a different change of perspective when Basil and Jess leave and nobody knows why they're leaving, and there's kind of that tension there. I would love to have followed them through their planning to get back the tapestry, how they executed this, and then the eventual reuniting with Matthias in that moment. I would have loved to take the time to just follow their perspective during the lead up and execution of that. So
cool. I don't really have an answer. I didn't think of an answer before when I wrote this question. I think I would like to see, I was thinking also, I would like to see a flashback episode with Basil Staghair and Captain Snow.
That would be cool, yeah.
So we can get some background
back in the days. How did he said he saved his life,
right.
And that's why that's a good answer too. It's show us that, you know. Even if it's well, let me tell you the story, old boy, and then it flashes back or whatever, you know.
Even if it was
Watts
just
or whatever he says.
Yeah. Even if it was just a flashback portion of the episode, like how in the first episode that Matthias' backstory is a flashback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Cool. All right,
those are Family Feud. Good answer.
Good answer. Yeah. Big money. Alrighty. Those are all the questions I have. Do you have any final thoughts?
Nope.
Alrighty. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode. We hope you had a good time. We know that we did. If you have an idea of what we should review next, you can send us a message on our suggestion forum on our website, which is lionandmousepodcast.com. You can also leave a comment on this YouTube video or comment on our Spotify episode, or reach out to us on any of our socials. We're Lion and Mouse Podcast on most of our socials. You can also on our website find links to our show notes, Patreon, socials, and then if you could review this episode wherever you listen to your podcasts. If I know every podcaster asks you for a 5-star review, but it really does help kind of change the algorithm, just like YouTube things, liking, commenting, subscribing. It really just helps us kind of, the algorithmic powers that be know that people like what they hear, and then it helps kind of suggest us to other listeners as well, which just helps us know what you guys like, what you don't like, what your feedback is helpful. We like to produce things that you guys like to listen to, and so the more feedback we get, the more we can do. Also, if you would want to suggest something, we do no spoilers, but we do have a viewer suggestion episode coming up soon. So thank you to the person that submitted the request, and you guys will probably see a post on our socials about what that episode is going to be. Thank you guys so much for listening. We so appreciate every support that you guys can give, and we will catch you in the next one.